Good evening. I'd like to call to order a special meeting of the Bellingham City Council. It's our first ever town hall meeting. We're here to discuss affordable housing. We are very eager to hear from as many of you as we can. We thank you very much for coming out tonight to share your ideas. I think everyone in City Hall and at City Council understands that there is a housing affordability problem. We're hoping to hear from you not so much about the problem, that'd be nice to hear from too, but also about your ideas about what the city can do and what other partners can do. I'd like to emphasize that this is not the beginning nor is it the end of a conversation. The city's been working on housing issues for many years, on and off or nonstop, and will continue. This is a midpoint in a public discussion we're having on housing. I'm now going to turn over the proceedings to Marie Marchand to introduce the panelists and the format tonight.
Good evening and welcome. I'm the legislative assistant, so I have the wonderful job of working with these council members. And one thing I've learned at this job is that people are passionate about housing, and that is why you are here tonight. Each year, the City of Bellingham collaborates with the Center for Economic and Business Research to conduct a citywide residential survey. Last year, housing affordability ranked second as the most important issue facing Bellingham. Homelessness ranked first. These survey results underscore the importance of community dialogue and events such as the one we're having tonight. One goal for this event is that we create a big tent under which many diverse and divergent viewpoints can be expressed. One caveat is that I don't want to take the metaphor too far because we don't want to have a circus under that big tent. But the spirit of the tent is that all people can feel comfortable and safe when speaking and also listening. On listening, Dr. M. Scott Peck wrote, "An essential part of true listening is the discipline of bracketing, the temporary giving up or setting aside of one's prejudices, frames of reference, or desires, so as to experience as far as possible the speaker's world." To this end, I have a few guidelines for our time together. If you happen to have a sign, please don't obstruct another audience member's view. When you agree with something, please refrain from cheering and applauding. And similarly, when you disagree with something, please refrain from any jeering or booing because every voice matters and openness is key in this conversation, as is pooling the collective brain power to try to solve the problem. The evening will be in two parts. The first is a presentation and panel discussion. The panelists are expert professionals who work in the field of housing. When they conclude their comments, I'll be asking them questions that were sent in by the public before the event. The second part is public comment, and that will be led by Council President Lilliquist. So let's begin. It is my pleasure to introduce the panelists. Ted Kelleher manages housing assistance at the Washington State Department of Commerce. He oversees the state's primary homeless housing grant program. He leads the creation of the state's homeless housing strategic plan, and in recent years, his work has expanded to include analyzing housing affordability and identifying potential policy changes to address the growing affordability crisis. Rick Sepler is Planning and Community Development Director for the City of Bellingham. Prior to joining the city in 2014, he was Community Service Director for the City of Port Townsend. He has authored zoning codes, comprehensive plans, and subdivision ordinances. He is president-elect of the Washington chapter of the American Planning Association. Greg Winter is executive director of Opportunity Council. Prior to that, he served for 7 years as director of the Whatcom Homeless Service Center in Opportunity Council program. He was also a co-founder of Colshan Community Land Trust in 1999. Rose Lathrop is the Green Building and Smart Growth Manager at Sustainable Connections. She has been instrumental in establishing some of Bellingham's most loved building projects, including Millworks Co-Housing, Kapow, and Solarize Whatcom. Rose is a lead professional and a sustainable building advisor, and was named as one of the 2016 Under 40 honorees by the Northwest Energy Coalition. And now I will hand it over to Ted Kelleher for his presentation.
Thank you for the introduction. Just real quickly, again, I work at the Department of Commerce and affordable housing issues and homelessness. And over the last 3 years, it's become really clear not only to our programs with affordability and homelessness, but to the department as a whole, that solving the affordability problem is central to the mission of the department. And in fact, we've involved the entire agency in thinking about the affordability problem to the extent that we're trying to recruit businesses and retain businesses in this state. It's really become a problem when housing isn't affordable to people with middle income jobs. So I know in Olympia, there's a real hunger for thinking for coming up with solutions to the affordability problem. The deeper we dive, the housing market is the confluence of all the systems you can think of. It's, education and land use and trade policy and everything else. So it's a very complicated issue to work through. I've got a lot of slides here. I'm going to go through them really quickly. My understanding is they'll be available afterwards, but I just know that people are very hungry to learn more. I know I've been doing these sorts of community conversations for a couple of years now. I'm guessing I'm going to learn at least as much as I'm going to provide to you all. So I'm excited to get out of Olympia and away from the spreadsheets and the research papers and engage an actual community. The slides you're going to see are, sort of generic slides about housing affordability issues. Each community is different. When I'm in Moses Lake, looking at they're having affordability issues there. They have a different complexion than you're seeing in Clark County, that you see in different places. But it's definitely you're seeing affordability problems all across the state, and we're very interested in taking the ideas that are generated like meetings like this and in other communities and applying them to the state as a whole. So since 2012, there's lots of inflection points you could look at, but I'm going to start with 2012. What happened? Things started changing in 2012. This is housing prices in Washington State. So, housing prices since 2012 have been soaring. It's not just Washington State, this is Texas. You can find this in pretty much any state or community with a relatively vibrant economy, and Texas being one of them. It's one of the communities we benchmark ourselves against for lots of reasons. But Washington State, here's rents. So, housing prices and rents, they don't always stay in lockstep, but they're sort of fungible in an economic term. Sometimes there's speculation in housing prices that misalign them with rents, but over the long term, there's a relationship. I'm mostly going to be talking about rents, but, the lessons that connected to housing prices are also associated with rents. Here's rents in Whatcom County. This is Zillow data. You'll see some census data later, which is in some ways more accurate. This is more timely. Salt Lake City, very different sort of community, but a vibrant community. You're also seeing rents soaring. Dallas, Vancouver, Washington. One of the things one of the metrics that we've really settled on that's important to look at, there's lots of them because again, it's a dynamic, complex issue, housing prices, but it's vacancy rates. It's that classic supply-demand thing. To the extent you've got a fixed number of people with jobs and incomes seeking out housing, if there's a limited supply of housing, the people with more resources will start bidding up the prices on what housing is available. So you can see, it's a little hard to read there. United States, you can see vacancy rates coming down significantly. I've got a number of communities here. Whatcom County is highlighted here. I think this is somewhat of a margin of error issue with the census data. I don't think it really dropped that much in 1 year, but it is definitely low. Like the unemployment rate, there's thought to be a sort of a balanced rate. And it's like the unemployment rate, there's not a consensus on what that is. My general read of the literature is around, you want a 6% vacancy rate. That's where you don't get prices accelerating, and it's also where there's enough supply. If you have too high a vacancy rate, then the prices collapse, and then you have other sorts of issues. But I think by any measure, the vacancy rate in Washington is too low at 3.3%. In Clark County, it's 2.2%. Last year in Seattle, it was 1.2%, and then it came back up. But anyway, definitely, I think, but there would be broad consensus to when it's down, below 5, 4, 3%, then there's really going to be a problem. Now, one of the discussions is it just sort of the oscillation of the market and the conditions in the market are set up that eventually the table has been set by land use and infrastructure and construction that'll equal out over time, or is it sort of a long-term squeeze that over time is going to raise prices above incomes? And here, this is a graph that shows the relationship between vacancy rates and rents. They're inversely related. So to the extent vacancy rates come down, you start to see rents go up and vice versa. So they're inversely related. And again, these are really complicated dynamic markets, but you'll see this when you run the data to the extent you have a squeeze in supply. You've got the musical chair sort of dynamic where people are bidding against each other for a limited supply of housing. You'll get increased prices, both in rents and purchase prices. And you could have rents and housing prices soaring. It wouldn't actually be a problem if incomes stayed in lockstep across the board, but they haven't been. This is a lot of data on this sheet, but real quickly, this is median rents. These are inflation-adjusted numbers. These green line is middle income rents. This is back to 2006. You can see that they've recovered. Middle incomes have recovered in real terms. And then these are the bottom 20% incomes. They have not, as of the 2015 census data, they have not even reached the place they were in 2006, or they've just barely touched it, and rents have gone up. So it's the divergence that's really the problem. And here's not inflation-adjusted data, same information for Whatcom County. Again, this is census data through 2015, rents, and then incomes. I think some of this is just the smaller sample size in the census data where I don't think the income necessarily dropped. It's just it oscillates around the error rate. But you might have more insight on that. What is affordable? So you'll hear often, the classic HUD and in other, housing and urban development and other frameworks is you shouldn't be paying more than 30% of your income for housing costs, that you're cost burdened. I guess, many people pay more than that, and that's okay. It's when you clearly, I think there's a consensus if you're paying more than 50% and you're below middle income, that's technically called severely cost burdened. That's definitely, for almost anyone, a problem. I won't get into this, but these slides will be available. There's there's a way of measuring housing affordability for purchase price. It's a similar dynamic in general. You shouldn't be paying more than 30%. Cost burden is an issue throughout Washington and the country. You can see the darker the colors, the worse the affordability problem. You can see the darker brown all up and down the Puget Sound corridor. You'll see it in other places too, though. Again, I was in Moses Lake. I was doing a similar talk in Moses Lake. I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Moses Lake. I need to adjust my talk because I'm sure they're not having any affordability problems. Then I looked at the data, and sure enough, wherever you go. Now, affordability, again, that severely cost burdened, which, there's lots of ways you can cut the data, but this is by income, so this is for the state as a whole, 0 to 30%. That means in Washington State, a family of 4 earning like $18,000. This dark blue group of people, about 190,000, are paying half of that 18,000, about 9,000 for housing costs. This is after all the subsidies and rent supports and welfare and whatever else. They're paying 50% of what limited income they have for housing. So this is definitely a group we worry a lot about. To the extent someone's making 100% of area median and they're severely cost burdened, still potentially a problem, probably more of a choice at that level. People are wanting to spend more on housing. Less of a choice at the lower level. And I won't get into this, but again, you can look at the slide. This is the Runstead Center at the UW, used to be at WSU, where they have an index of housing affordability by counties. I've included some sample counties. Anything in the index above 100 is affordable. Anything less is not affordable. You'll see for middle income people, there's actually a fair amount of affordability in this state because incomes are actually growing, earned incomes especially. Fixed incomes, disability incomes are not keeping pace, but earned incomes are growing pretty well in the state. First-time home buyers, you'll see lots of instances where it's below 100, which means it's not affordable. And back to why I spend a lot of time thinking about affordability. You know, my job description, as it's ostensibly written, is largely around homelessness, but we were realizing that we're eking out measurably, 10, 20% efficiency improvements, and for every dollar spent, we were getting better and better results, doing all this great performance management, and just being completely overwhelmed by the affordability crisis. No matter how efficient we were getting, and we were looking at how many dollars we need to invest to keep up with the larger market affordability problems, unlikely we'd be able to generate the public subsidies necessary to compensate for the problems we're having with affordability. So for this research, and don't take these links too literally, but the national research, it's just more about the relationship. The national research shows a $100 increase in rent is associated with between a 6 and 32% increase in homelessness. So even if everything else is going great, you'll get increases in homelessness just by having rent increases. And as you can see, when the rent started coming up, homelessness started going up. One of the things we looked at, and I'm definitely open to looking at more, but there's a long paper on our website where we just keep pulling more and more research, looking at other factors. And we keep looking at other factors to see are there other drivers of homelessness, such as educational attainment, maybe families aren't stable, et cetera, alcohol and drug dependence, employment rates. And without going, I have a whole 40-minute presentation on that one, which I'm happy to share with you offline, but we're really only seeing rent increases as the factor that's changed. It's not to say these other issues don't continue to be issues, but in terms of a trend that's been accelerating since 2013, Washington State is actually doing, if you did sort of a report card on family and economic health, doing really well, except for in the housing affordability realm. And why are rents increasing? Again, these are sort of generic things, but jobs, people moving into the state, low vacancy rates, the construction industry, and this is true nationally, even to the extent people have money to rent or construct housing, the infrastructure of construction workers and finance professionals was reduced significantly. People left that industry for good reason, went to do something else, and now the industry is still catching up with the ability to just, even in markets where there's unlimited land, just the ability to put the houses together. And then again, this is some of the problem we're having is just the downfall of having a successful economy, and there's downsides to that. So our Washington State actually was number one in terms of GDP growth. If you look at this chart, number one in the last cycle. And Bellingham was, I was looking at this data like 6 months ago or whenever when it came out, and I was like, Bellingham? And I still am interested to talk to you all about what the dynamics of this is. But Bellingham was actually in the western region faster growing than Seattle. You're like the bright spot of GDP growth. Now, I think some of it is you had a negative growth, so you were compensating for some of that. But yeah, in the whole West Coast, you guys like crushed it all, so it's better than being Detroit. I mean, part of your affordability problem is that you're a dynamic, growing community. And here again, this is the relationship in Washington State. You can see that these are the number of change in housing units since 2012, and this is the change in number of jobs. So lots of jobs. And I guess one of the outstanding questions is over time the market just gonna naturally correct that? I think that's a legitimate proposition. I worry about just sort of passively hoping that happens. And we really want to dig deep and make sure that we're set up to be successful. And this is, don't take the numbers too seriously, but again, the relationships, rough estimates of drivers of housing prices. They did some analysis of data in San Francisco. For every 1% increase in jobs, rents went up 1%, incomes went up 1%, caused a 1.74% rent increase, and then this one, a 1% increase in the supply of housing, the number of units, led to a 1.7% decrease in rent. And so then I think the outstanding question, and I don't have a definitive answer. I think it's possible for is there enough leverage in local and state land use policy, regulations, and infrastructure policy to keep median market rate rents in sync with median incomes? I know that I'm pretty confident, based on what I know, and I'm learning more today, that you could sabotage it so that they didn't stay in Link. You can see some of that in the Bay Area where they don't build anything as a general proposition and rents just soar out of control, and they're actually actively working to prevent employers from coming there because it's just, they're failing. I'm not clear that there's enough leverage in public policy to maintain affordability though. And then quickly, this is going to be addressed in a question. There's a thing called filtering, and maybe we'll talk about that later. But to the extent you build anything, it's going to help. Because to the extent you have someone in a unit that has a higher income, and there's a unit available at a higher income level, and they move into it, they're freeing up supply. And back to that supply, just supply in general helps. And over time, that supply, today's luxury unit, will depreciate to a more affordable unit. So supply of any kind helps. Small units are naturally affordable. So any unit helps. A small unit helps more just because it's smaller. Therefore, it costs less. In most places, it's illegal to build the affordable housing of 100 years ago. Here, this is actually across the street from my house. This was a duplex built in 1901, affordable unit. You couldn't build this unit now. In my neighborhood now, if I tried to turn my house into a duplex, it would be not possible. Even though before the regulations, the market just naturally built a mix of duplexes and single-family homes. And this, yeah. And I won't get into this, but this, again, we've been very, very focused. It's on a bipartisan level. People have sincerely been digging deep, and they haven't come up with an easy solution. But these are a number of recommendations on the interim. You'll see the last one is just to continue working this issue. And I've been involved in a lot of advisory processes over the year. People are digging deep, and they're coming up with proposals. They're putting them into legislation. They're having spirited discussions. Olympia is hungry for your feedback about what can change at the state level to make affordability better. So I'm interested to hear the rest of the conversation, and thank you for inviting me here today.
Thank you for having me this evening. And it's a great pleasure to talk about an issue that is very challenging. It's an issue that's one of the most important things to our community. Affordable housing is one that we focus on through a variety of means. In our comprehensive plan, specifically in our implementing regulations, we work to ensure that adequate land is available to provide for a diversity of housing types. Right now in Bellingham and its UGA, we have capacity for 17,123 more units. That's extracting out all those lands that would need for roads, those lands you can't build on, and those lands that are already built, plus a market factor on top of that. So we have capacity to build to cover 20 years worth of growth. The question is, how can we get it when we need it sooner? In looking at that, the city's role really is to ensure that infrastructure and utilities necessary to support that growth is provided, and to ensure that when we provide it, we maintain our level of service that we value so much as the community. That's dealing with the provision of services, the response time when you call for public safety, fire, or police, level of service we have in our parks that we value so much, and other means. And in doing so, we try to support the city's high quality of life, because the high quality of life is a key determinant on why people wish to stay here, raise their families here, spend their lives here. We act as stewards of the housing levy. As many of you know, this community chose to tax itself to help the most challenged provide housing in a very difficult time, and we take that role very seriously and look to leverage the dollars we have to achieve the most end. And finally, the city is great at calling meetings like this one, bringing people together, allowing for an interchange and discussion of key ideas, and working to find agreement to move forward on. We've had a number of focused efforts that are really targeted at housing and the housing issues that I think Ted raised very articulately. In doing that, we've had the countywide Housing Affordability Task Force. It was reconvened. There were a number of recommendations that came out of that we chose to further and implement. Our housing element in the comprehensive plan is a very succinct summary of the approach we're using to provide a range of housing choices over the next 20-year horizon. It was one that we as a community anguished over. Which is the best approach? Which is the best way to accommodate it? How do we ensure we achieve our ends? The consolidated plan, which is being updated right now, talks about how we deal with the housing for the most challenged in our community. And we are partners with Whatcom County on our 10-year plan currently being revised to end homelessness. From those plans, from those strategies, we have a number of implementing measures. Lean permitting. We have cut significantly the time for single-family permits, for example. On the average, they could be done, if there weren't unique circumstances, in a week. That's remarkable compared to any city in the county or any city on the West Coast, quite frankly. We've developed the infill toolkit. It's the infill housing toolkit, which has a variety of house forms. I'm glad that Ted showed that slide. That form, the duplex, was a traditional form in Bellingham for a number of years and is found in many of our historic neighborhoods. We've developed a number of incentives. These incentives include the multifamily tax exemption, system development charge reductions, which allow for lower connection charges to utilities for qualifying projects, and density bonuses. In areas that are targeted, that we have infrastructure, like our urban villages, we allow for increased density, and we encourage developers to max out the project because those are the places we have the services to accommodate them. We have developed a fairly robust urban village strategy. I'm going to talk in a moment about some of the results that have come from that, and I think we see good indicators in that. Inclusionary zoning is where you have a number of units that are created by an individual or group, and you require a percentage of those units to be affordable. We did study that in length. Our market is not quite ripe. And the reason it's not ripe is you need a higher volume of units to be able to get the extraction of those affordable units as a requirement. Our numbers just don't balance at this point. The market has responded, and we've seen some very exciting things. These are things that indicate that we're on the right track in some areas. The first is in terms of our urban village strategy. Since 2006, 45% of all residential units in Bellingham have developed in urban villages. Now, it hasn't been even, and there are some that are somewhat dormant and need somewhat of a kickstart, but others have succeeded beyond our measure and are showing the viability of the strategy itself. In terms of affordable units, we have been fairly good stewards, as I mentioned, of the housing levy, and we've had 355 units that were built since the levy was passed, and a further 568 are under contract. And if you're doing the math, we originally thought we'd have 770 or so units come out of the levy. We've wildly exceeded that. It's through partnerships and the involvement of organizations and everyone working together to provide those units. We have seen an increase in the infill toolkit. The infill toolkit is not allowed in all neighborhoods, only in multifamily zones and those that came into the city after 1996, plus some exceptions. In that, we have 24 infill units. Infill units are ones that go in those areas that already have services. They typically are smaller, as Ted mentioned. They typically are less expensive, and they provide a reasonable housing choice. When we talk infill, we're not talking a tower of multifamily. We're talking duplexes, quadplexes, a small row house of 4 units. That's the kind of infill that we seek to encourage in those areas that allow it. In that, we've seen 24 units completed, 13 are under construction, 9 units are approved, pending the start of construction, and here's where it gets exciting, 337 units in permitting right now on 24 different projects. This is the market responding to a need to have more affordable product, but it's responding after being virtually dormant for 4 years and not producing product. Okay. In terms of our permit applications, we've seen that rebound occur. We see a significant number of single-family homes coming in, and equally exciting, a significant number of commercial permits coming in for both new construction as well as tenant improvements. That attests to the strength of the economy itself. We do have challenges in our vacancy rates. By our accounting, we're somewhere between 1.8% in terms of homeowner vacancy, and somewhere about 3.2% in terms of rental vacancy in our community at this time. So we've taken a start, but as noted by the council president, it's the start of a journey, not the finish. We have lots of work left to do. This is an issue that is in every conversation that goes on in City Hall now. People spend their days working to see better ways to proceed. The city, and I can attest to this, is doing just about everything that is legally allowed at this point in time. We've pursued avenues we never thought possible. We've added a story in terms of light frame construction by adopting a change in our building code that we spearheaded in Olympia, so that multifamily housing can go to 6 stories of light frame over a plinth of concrete. That extra story provides greater housing opportunity. We have acknowledged that it's a very complex issue. There's no one silver bullet. If there was one silver bullet that we could consider that would change everything, I would assure you we would have offered it up and done it. The city does have a role, but everyone needs to participate. While we are a regulator, while we're a convener, while we set rules and regulations, it requires on a marketplace to act. There are changing needs that are occurring. There are changing natures of families, there are changing natures of households, and the city needs to be responsive. We need to look beyond the traditional measure of house type to find that diversity that meets many of our families, individuals' needs into the future. Additionally, there are always more approaches to review and explore. We have scoured the websites, we have gone to the meetings, we have contacted the jurisdictions, and we will continue to do so. We have no shame. If there is a good idea, we'll bring it forward, and we will attribute it to whoever it is who created it. We look at the successes elsewhere, but we have to temper that with, would it work here in our community? And finally, one of the exciting parts about tonight's meeting is we're interested in your ideas, things we might not have considered or approaches we may have overlooked. Those good ideas are starting points, and we'll pay rapt attention as we move forward. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I don't have any slides, and I don't have any numbers either, because I knew Ted was coming, and he'd have more numbers than any of us could possibly provide. My name's Greg Winter. Again, I'm Executive Director of Opportunity Council. Our service territory includes Whatcom Island and San Juan counties, and we're seeing this problem, as Ted alluded to, it's statewide, and we're seeing it across our 3-county service region. You know, in some ways, in Island County and San Juan County, it's even more of a crisis by some measures. And from the Opportunity Council's perspective, where for decades we've been providing assistance to try to address and reduce homelessness, you know, we're primarily focusing on the very low end of the income spectrum and low-resourced households. And when we are seeing this sudden and pretty dramatic rise in the number of people living in our community that are unsheltered, you know, to us, it's not just a market failure. I consider it to be really an infrastructure failure. If you think of affordable housing as infrastructure, it really makes sense because it provides the same services that other traditional infrastructure that we think of, roads, water systems, sewer systems. It provides for public health and safety. It encourages economic development and supports commerce. Another reason that Ted's here. And so, you know, when you have both market failure and infrastructure failure, it's really a signal that we need everybody's ideas. So I'm really pleased to hear Rick invite the ideas, admit that the city is trying everything possible, but still open to the ideas that there might be some other ideas out there. And when I look around our community and the time that I've been involved in affordable housing issues since about 1997, starting out really around affordable home ownership with my co-founders and I founding Culshan Community Land Trust, I've seen some amazing partnerships in the community. We really know how to respond to this problem. Our primary challenge is scaling things up, getting buy-in and scaling up. When I think about some of the exciting projects like the partnership between Habitat for Humanity and Culshan Community Land Trust around creating super energy efficient, high quality townhomes that are going to be affordable to very low income homeowners at prices that are below the average rent, at mortgage payments below the average rent. I mean, that's amazing. If we can do that, I think there's a lot that we can do that we haven't even really thought of before. And So, to use a tired old phrase, it's really an all-hands-on-deck moment. Rick alluded to the housing levy, this really precious resource where we asked the community to tax itself. And in a stunning production of units, so far already the levy is exceeding what those of us who helped design it and advocate for it dreamed. And so that's another bright spot. So I guess I'm kind of a glass half full person on the stage tonight because I see tremendous potential in the community, and I'm looking forward to, my comments are very brief because I want to do what I can to leave some time so we can have more Q&A, and so thank you.
Hi, I'm Rose. I'm the Green Building and Smart Growth Program Manager for Sustainable Connections, but I am here wearing 3 hats. I am a longtime resident, and I'm also a former developer working for Ike Homes, which is a small local builder in town. And so when I look at the housing issue, I really think about this from all perspectives, and from our community perspective, the public perspective, the private sector, and now I have the nonprofit hat also. So our mission is to promote healthy and efficient buildings and vibrant neighborhoods, and there's nowhere I'd rather do that than in Bellingham. And so I spent my early career working for Ike Homes and a developer, and during that time we had dozens of clients that wanted homes that reflected their values. They wanted them to be modest in size and energy efficient, and of course within our charming, walkable, beautiful neighborhoods in Bellingham. And this is no easy task. The lots that are available in these neighborhoods typically have been built on haven't been built on for a reason, because they're ridiculously expensive, or they have critical areas or utility issues. The list can go on why it's hard to build within our existing neighborhoods. But I was proud of the houses we built. They were beautiful, built green, Energy Star certified homes. They were everything, but they were not affordable. And Ike was a small local builder, and like many of the builders and designers here in Bellingham, they cared about our community, and they wanted to do more. I'm seeing in my working for Sustainable Connections that there's a lot of builders that are trying to do the right thing regardless of what their clients are asking for. They're building energy efficient, beautiful homes and pushing innovation. So I believe that's a value in our community that we're seeing all across the board. But at Ike, we were killing it at the green building game, but struggled to really provide the smart growth housing options that address the needs of our clients and for the rest of our community. The options to be innovative and create housing forms other than single-family homes were nearly impossible in places that our clients want it to be. It's really easy to build outside of town, but that's not where people want to be, and that's not smart growth. In 2008, I was giving a presentation on green building, and nobody showed up. And it was a real bummer. There was 3 people there, and lo and behold, those 3 people were really interested in building next door to each other, and that one presentation led to the Millworks Co-Housing Project. And this was a super awesome opportunity for our company, not only because it was in the middle of the recession and we had plenty of time on our hands, but we were able to do something innovative and different in a single-family zone, and that's really hard to do in Bellingham. As Rick was saying, those infill toolkit to do alternative housing types within our single-family zones is pretty much impossible. Unless you can utilize the co-housing code or the affordable housing demonstration ordinance. So with the co-housing code, you have the flexibility in design and scale and housing type and shared resources and parking, and all of that led to being able to put more houses on one piece of property than we would have otherwise if it was a standard subdivision. And that was a really pivotal moment for me recognizing the need in our community, because I've done dozens of tours of both Millworks and Bellingham co-housing, and there's so much desire. We've had hundreds of people asking how they can get in, and when is the next one going to open up, and can they get on a list? And so it's a true need to have something different than just a standard single-family home. And it's amazing, these communities, not only do you get a different housing type, but the community that gets built. And it's not hippies that are wanting to live in a commune, it's just people like you that want to have your kids go outside and play, and they flock like birds around the community, and it's really beautiful. And so it was so present that now more than ever, people are looking to live in walkable neighborhoods, near jobs, near transit, services, with opportunities to build community, like in Millworks. So to accommodate this market and to give the most opportunity to the most people, we need to innovate with the land we have available. Several of our local builders and designers, as Rick was saying, are taking on this challenge and working on infill projects, and those are not in our core neighborhoods primarily. Some of them are. They're in multifamily zones. They're not in our single-family zones. I'm particularly proud of the very first infill toolkit project, which was the RJ Group did their Peabody project. This was 8 townhomes or 7 townhomes with 6 ADUs. And not only is it a great smart growth story in that they were able to put in a lot of number of units into an area of town that it fit well and fit into the context, the design and the scale worked. But when you actually started to get to know the project a little bit better, and you get the stories of the people that live there, it's an older lady that didn't want to live by herself and needed the extra income, so the ADU worked for her. Another case, it was a single mom and her kids, and she wanted her mom nearby to help out with the kids. So in each one had like one of these great stories that really makes you recognize that these accessory dwelling units and alternative housing forms are providing something that our community really needs and helping in ways that you can't get out of a single family house. And I would welcome Peabody on my street any day. And that's me and my daughter. And I want to recognize that there really is changing demographics, and the market is shifting, and the American dream is changing. Not everybody wants the single family home. And there's got to be something in between the single family home and a mid-rise apartment. And I, believe it or not, I'm going to be an empty nester in less than 2 years. And I'm not crying right now, but normally I do when I say that. And I need something in between. I don't need to have the big yard. I don't need to have the single family house, and I don't want to take care of the big yard by myself. But certainly the opportunity to put in additional housing in my 10,000 square foot lot in Happy Valley seems like a reasonable choice. I could then also afford to send my daughter to college. It seems like a good solution. It's a social solution for me. It's an affordability solution for me. And currently it's not allowed. So I think we need to start exploring these options of how we can find innovative housing solutions within our existing neighborhoods, the places where our low-income populations need it the most. They need to be close to our services. They need to be close to transportation. They deserve to have the same cute, charming neighborhoods that we all in our single-family homes deserve. So really, I just wanted to kind of point out that there's so much opportunity to do beautiful infill projects that are designed well, that hit all of the targets, because these infill projects help us, the compact urban design increases accessibility and affordability of homes, providing necessary stability for lower income populations, improves transportation options, including access to parks, trails, safe places to play, promoting a healthier, active lifestyle, It encourages social connections and community engagement, giving people a feeling of belonging and sense of place. Increases access to healthy, fresh foods, reducing obesity rates, and it's no secret that compact urban design has a positive impact on the environment. And that's something that I think is really important and a value of our community. We see it time and time again that Bellingham values the environment we pay for our parks. So compact urban design helps with energy efficiency and emissions. It reduces our urban growth area and helps us preserve our green space. There's just a lot of reasons why we should be looking to do more projects like this. Is Mathai Place. It's a beautiful built green, low-impact development project in the Happy Valley neighborhood. It fits into the context. It's high density. There's so many great things about it, and we need to be able to do this more and at market rates so that we can have, it's not just for the affordable housing folks, but for everyone. So I could carry on about the equity and social justice issues infill can provide for our community and how great design and scale won't destroy the character of our neighborhoods, but I don't have much time, so I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for putting that.
Thank you so much, panelists. And now comes a great time. We had questions that were submitted from members of the public before this event. So we have about a little over 10 minutes or so to get into these questions. The first question is for Greg, and it's from April McCabe. Is there a way to prevent landlords from discriminating against people who have housing assistance, such as Veteran Assistant Housing Vouchers, otherwise known as VASH, or Section 8 housing vouchers, or individuals or families that are on a fixed income, such as temporary assistance to needy families or Social Security?
Yeah, as you know, Ted pointed out in his presentation, we really do have to think about this in terms of supply and demand. And so when we have scarcity in the rental housing market and we have rapid escalation in rents, we also have a lot of applicants at the same time applying for any available unit. And it becomes a real seller's market. And what we know from data from the Bellingham Housing Authority is that since 2013, the number of landlords that are participating in the Section 8 program, for example, one of those assistance programs that Marie just mentioned, the number of landlords participating in that program, in other words, taking those rental assistance voucher, has been steadily declining, and at a pretty significant clip. So, so that's a problem because we end up with this. One of the answers, a partial answer to the affordable housing problem for low-income renters that and now is at risk of not being able to be used in the community. So one policy response to that I'm pleased that some people are considering and many communities have implemented is a source of income discrimination ordinance. Essentially what it does, it augments the existing jurisdiction's fair housing law about what types of discrimination are disallowed, for example, race, ethnicity, sex, sexual orientation, et cetera, and adds source of income to that list. So we don't have time, I don't think, to get into the details of that, but I'm pleased to know that there are some policymakers here in Bellingham that are seriously looking at a policy like that here for Bellingham. I think it's time.
Thank you. The next question was submitted by Wendy Harris, and it's for Ted. And some of these questions the panelists have already touched on, so if you'd like to elaborate, or maybe another panelist would like to offer his or her perspective. So, Ted, everyone acts on the assumption that more housing equals more affordable housing, but I have not seen any proof of this. Do you have support for this?
I love this question. Part of the process I've really tried to dig in deep and recheck all my assumptions about what I believe and what the data actually shows. I think one statement that's generally true is be wary of anyone who says, well, Economics 101 says, That said, let me, do economics 101. I mean, part of why you should be worried about that is, there is other courses in economics, and one of the things that classically in recent decades that economics discovered is that, for instance, the minimum wage does not have the impact that they assumed it did when they looked at actual data and they looked at it really rigorously. That said, I've looked at arguments and dug deep in the literature and tried to find a plausible mechanism where adding supply didn't reduce rents, or at least let them accelerate at a lower rate. And I haven't seen anything plausible. There's been a fair amount of recent debate, actually, because this is a nationwide problem. You've got lots of prominent economists having these fights in blogs and papers with each other about what's going on. But one way of thinking of it, this classic economics 101, you add supply, the price goes down. One thought experiment that I thought was interesting was, well, what if you took the luxury unit and you tore it down? Would that reduce price? I mean, no. So I mean, it's sort of the opposite. When you build a luxury unit, is that going to the extent you tore down a luxury unit, the people who were in that unit would then be competing in the game of musical chairs for what housing was left, and with the limited supply, bid it up. I think one thing you hear is, oh, there's lots of cranes, there's all this construction, and prices are still going up. I think, as you can see in the vacancy rates, I mean, Seattle has more cranes than any other city in the country right now, but they still have a really limited vacancy rate. So you can have a lot of construction and people say, oh, there's all this construction and rents are going up. It's rents are going up because you have a vibrant economy that's inciting the construction. Even though you're seeing a lot of construction, it's not necessarily enough. And then, back to the slide on there, any supply helps. So you might put up a luxury unit, but the research is pretty clear that over time, what a luxury unit, and you can see this, right? You see some old 60s apartment building. I'm sure it was like the classic, everyone wanted to live there in 1960. Now it's relatively affordable because things depreciate over time. So supply helps. And I haven't seen a plausible mechanism, although I'm still looking for why it wouldn't help at least slow the increase.
Thank you. And Rose, this question's for you from Rihanna Johnston. How can we use our housing policy to combat climate change?
Well, there's exciting work in that area right now. We're working with a regional advocacy committee looking at net zero carbon buildings and identifying opportunities to bring the incentives and eliminate barriers within land use code and within the building code to make these more accessible. But we are seeing in Bellingham, the market is doing it on its own. There are now 4 net zero energy homes within Bellingham, and that's not because there was a certification program or that they got a big incentive check out of it. It's just because it's the direction that people wanted to go. And so there's a lot of opportunity. I'm excited to see that grow. We're going to be presenting ideas and working with the city over the next year, looking at things like the housing levy and how we could leverage that to as an opportunity to include more green building incentives within the housing levy is just one idea that we'll be working on to sort of get out there. There's more about incentives in terms of how we can help to provide the free technical assistance and those types of things. But primarily, I think when we look at climate change, one of the best things we can do is reduce our footprint and the size of our homes, so the smaller homes we have, and quite honestly, when in multifamily, when you're duplexes or townhomes, and you have more shared walls, those are more efficient buildings. So you can. There are lots of examples of passive house or net zero energy homes, and it's a lot easier the closer they are together, and you're sharing walls and things like that.
Thank you. Rick, this question is for you. It was submitted by Jill McIntyre-Witt. In our conversations around housing and public meetings for permits, how do we make sure to include people who have less access to the process, like young parents, immigrants who may have a language barrier, people who are working 2 jobs to pay rent, and people unfamiliar with the nuances of zoning laws?
Well, I think that's something we could always do better in as a community. We have explored all of the traditional means of reaching out to folks, and we've looked at technology as a means of increasing our message. But let's face it, folks' lives are busy, often challenging. It's hard to reach them. I think we need to find ways where groups and folks we identify as not being at the table for the discussion can't participate. We need to go to them, and we need to do enhanced outreach. We need to find the places that we can reach them. We need to have those conversations. It might be at a church after services on a Sunday, or it might be in the school cafeteria. But we need to we'll keep doing the traditional means, but we need to augment it with a broader range of strategies to engage folks. I should also say that my colleagues at Planning and Community Development will go to any meeting. We'll meet with you in our department. We want to hear from you. We want to answer your questions as they come up. All phone calls are returned. And I think with that ethic, we should be able to be more successful in getting the message out and hearing points of view. Tonight's a good example of not a traditional way to bring people together to hear points of view.
Marie, I don't know if are we allowed to
Yes, please.
also talk to?
Please.
So I just like, I'm sure there's other people in the audience that could say this too, so I'll just, maybe lead by example. As far as Opportunity Council goes, we have access to people that may, be part of the categories that Marie referenced in her question. And so we'd be happy to help work with the city to facilitate conversations with, for example, families that are enrolled in our Head Start programs, or people that are challenged who are severely cost burdened in their housing, or through our, the homeless outreach team, people who have no housing at all. So thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have time for one more question before public comment. And this is for Ted from Dean Fearing. What incentives can cities provide for condominiums, market rate and affordable? Condos would be a great way to provide infill close to jobs and services, but none are being built due to limited bank financing.
Wow, this is a really good question. I've been involved with the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, staffing that for more than a decade now. And this is an issue that's been pretty intensely examined over the last 5 years. And there's very passionate, well thought out thoughts about why condos aren't being built. I think it's definitely a problem. I mean, it's a problem from my mind anyway, that condos aren't being built, because it is an affordable entry point for ownership and equity building. There's some discussions around something, does it have to do with liability changes? Is it really just that the laws are actually, the counter argument is in state law that the state law is fine. It's just that people experienced a shock, and the underwriters of insurance haven't caught up with the reality of what the market is like now. And if they actually just built something, they would find that the current regulatory environment is okay. So I think, just separate from incentives, just making sure that we've got our laws in order is something that's been deeply examined and heavily discussed, and there hasn't been a clear resolution. To the extent that someone provided an incentive and that sparked the market and tested out whether, that pushed developers over the edge so they were willing to move forward and take, I guess, a risk, that could be good. I mean, I think it is an important part of the market segment that all across the state is not being built at the level that would make sense in my mind in terms of having a mix of all sorts of rental and purchase options.
If I could follow up, I think a significant part is the liability. Condos have a history of being litigious, dealing with sheathing in windows and water seepage and other issues, and folks have shied away from it. In Seattle, the growth has been, and in other areas that are trying to provide housing choice, has been fee simple lots associated with row houses or townhomes, because it avoids that. There might be a limited association for common maintenance, but you own your own lot. And that's why we've seen unprecedented growth in Seattle. It's the largest market now for townhouse or row construction in America.
in the area of good ideas that may be out there in the community. My good friend Paul Schisler, who's somewhere in the audience here today, has been talking to Opportunity Council about an idea that's kind of a hybrid that actually could provide something that might, to the casual observer, look like a condo, but it's actually more like a co-op. So imagine borrowing the shared equity model that community land trusts use, where you develop an apartment building. You actually have the nonprofit owner-developer hold the mortgage on that, and then you are actually then providing an ownership share by to the tenants that occupy the building. So it's kind of this hybrid model. I don't think we have an example of that yet, but we have some good ideas out there, and I think we have some willing partners. And imagine putting some of these hybrid buildings downtown where we have people earning equity and they're paying rents that are affordable at the wages that are being paid downtown.
Thank you all. Please help me thank the panelists for joining us. And at this point, I'd like to invite the council members to come up, please. So we will now move into the public comment segment of the evening. There will be at least 22 people speaking for a time limit of 2 minutes, and if there's additional time, we will have additional people. In order to accommodate as many speakers as possible tonight, the panel and the city council members will not be answering questions tonight. However, they will be taking your questions and the overall sentiment of the evening and have council committee of the whole on Monday afternoon to discuss it, and most likely at future meetings as well. So I'm going to turn it over to President Lilliquist, but first I wanted to let you know that I'll be timing you, and when you have 30 seconds left, I'll hold this up so that you know you can kind of close your comments out, and then when the 2 minutes is up, you'll hear this sound. Great, thank you.
Again, good evening, everyone. For those of you who have come to city council meetings before, I'll be following a very, very similar procedure. I'll be calling out a couple names in a row, so when you hear your name, come over to the microphone. If you're coming up next, there's some chairs there you can sit in and wait in the wings, and you'll come up next. And we can move through this hopefully pretty quickly. I don't want to rush anyone, but if you can say your piece and move on, we might be able to get to a few people at the bottom of the list.
Well, I'm Alan, and I moved here from Seattle, and when I first moved to Seattle, I wound up within a week getting financially wiped out and homeless. If it hadn't been for a very nice Japanese family that took me in for a year and a half, I would have been on the streets. So I'm very sympathetic to the homeless cause and the need for that. I'm also now somewhat recovered. I've gotten under disability, I have my Medicare and stuff, but I am on Section 8. And I wanted to move here to Bellingham for the people and for hardware sales. And true. And the problem I didn't realize, I researched this for a year and a half to move up here. And I was gung-ho, I got up here, and oops, my biggest thing I ran into was trying to find the apartments that I saw online for $600 range. And they're either for students or they're run by huge management companies that absolutely refuse to talk Section 8. And when he said legally allowed, that's one of the things I wanted to see. And I heard that you are looking at that kind of thing. I strongly recommend that we need protection. The fact that the landlords have declined so much in supporting Section 8 is a major problem. And I'm going to leave it at that because that and tiny homes, infill, all for it. Thank you.
Hi, I think Kira had to go home, but my name's Hannah Fishman, and I'm a member of the Bellingham Tenants Union, and I'm lucky enough to live in this city with, a middle-class job and, a full-time job, and I can afford my rent for the most part, but last year it went up by over $150. That's just my own portion of the rent, and that was crazy. It was unaffordable. And that's one of the reasons, why we all started organizing as a tenants union, because, we as working people living here can no longer afford to live in the city. I'm going to be moving out to the county in all likelihood and spending more on gas and burning more fossil fuels to commute in here to work. But what I've learned organizing with the tenants union is that I'm really very lucky to even be able to do that. I've heard all sorts of horror stories from people about, their hot water heaters never getting fixed. I mean, even after the inspection program started, I have coworkers and friends who still struggle with mold and health problems in the winter. And basically, I think the city needs to do and can do a lot more to promote affordable housing here and stop the kind of exploitation that the large management companies are doing of the majority of the people in Bellingham who actually rent. So I think Section 8 and source of income discrimination is a really good first step, but only a first step.
Hello, I'm Michelle Stelvich, and I work as a case resource manager, and I work with people with developmental disabilities. And many of them have Section 8 housing. And what I'm seeing is that their leases aren't getting renewed. When they do look for places, there's the apartment complex say we don't take Section 8 housing, and that they're having more and more trouble finding housing that's on bus lines, because in order to get to their primary services, they're taking public transportation. And so I'm concerned about what's happening to my clients. One was told, if you want to keep your Section 8 housing, you're going to have to go to Sumas, so eventually maybe you can come back in to Bellingham. And then when I come to look at the housing and see where my clients are living, I'm concerned about the maintenance of the building. Some of the organizations and the apartment complexes do a beautiful job, and they've done, they're nice, they're well taken care of, and then there's the others that are not. And my clients are afraid to say anything because they're afraid that their leases will not be renewed if they complain. So they have mold in their house, things aren't getting repaired, their drywall is wet, and they don't have a good recourse to kind of be able to have those things fixed. So I'm hoping that we can find ways in being able to look at inspections that are more vigorous and have more teeth to them, and also that there is not ability to put on your website, we do not take Section 8 housing, and that people can have an opportunity to live in places where they can get to the services that they need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know what? It just pointed out to me that I actually didn't introduce anyone up here on the dais. So I'm Michael. I represent the 6th Ward. I'm the council president this year. Go ahead, Gene. Could you start off?
Gene Knutson, Bellingham City Council, 2nd Ward.
Terry Borneman, Bellingham City Council, 5th Ward.
April Barker, 1st Ward.
Pinky Vargas, Ward 4.
Roxanne Murphy, Bellingham City Council Member at Large.
Dan Hamill, Bellingham City Council, Ward 3.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
We'll get you later.
Okay. Dana Briggs next, please, followed by Ben Larson, and then Sam Grello.
My name is Dana Briggs. I've had the opportunity, after having been gone for 14 years and living in the greater Seattle area, of having moved back to Bellingham last August because of economic reasons and also because I preferred it here after having tried to live in the Seattle area during that time. To use the terminology, I was severely burdened in Seattle, even with roommates, the entire 14 years that I was down there, and paid more than half of my income for that 14 years for a 700 square foot apartment. Okay? To me, this whole thing is not about the economics, it's not about the policies, it's not about the procedures. What it is it is an ethical issue. It's an ethical issue as to whether this community is going to create all of those things that I just mentioned, that's going to reflect whether we really want to have an economically diverse community or not. If you want to have the economically diverse community, then you will find the way to make it happen. Do the people who work at the minimum wage jobs in the restaurants, that clean your rear ends in the hospitals, that take care of your children and everything else, are they as important and are they an integral part of this community? Because With the way things are now, they're stressed beyond belief. They're either living way out in the county or they're living probably in the county south, just like many of the workers in the Seattle area live in Pierce County, Snohomish County, and all over the place because they flat cannot afford to live in King County where they work. It's an ethics issue, people. We'll do it if we want to have community. If you don't want community, then continue down the path that you've been going down. Thank you.
Hello, City Council members. My name is Ben Larson. I'm a member of the Bellingham Tenants Union. I'd like to thank the City Council for organizing and hosting this meeting and the wonderful presenters who gave very informative presentations to start off. I'd like to share a solution that can help tackle our community's housing challenge as well as other community priorities like combating climate change and fighting poverty. The solution is a concept called transit-oriented development, or TOD for short. TOD creates walkable communities for people of all ages and incomes and provides more transportation and housing choices. The general idea is that you allow for greater availability of homes and density along transit lines, and in doing so, you create walkable communities with transit access. And we already do this in Bellingham, like across the street on Cornwall, there are townhomes. And these are homes that allow more families to live close to schools, like this one, close to bus lines, and close to groceries and restaurants. It's a concept championed by the EPA. The EPA's website states that TOD can help lower household transportation costs, boost public transportation ridership, reduce greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution, spur economic development, and make housing more affordable by reducing developer expenditure on parking and allowing higher density zoning. Transit access, in addition to being great for climate, also helps people fight poverty. The New York Times article in 2015 titled "Transportation Emerges as a Crucial to Escaping Poverty" by Michaela Bouchard reported a 16-year study by Harvard University about determinants of social mobility. Transit access came out as one of the top factors. So Bellingham is already doing this, but we can do better. We can apply transit-oriented development concepts to more of our zoning and allow for more missing middle homes like backyard cottages, townhouses, and cottage housing in neighborhood blocks close to transit access. These forms of building are more affordable due to shared walls and lower construction costs. In my personal experience, living in the York District in a duplex has offered me a lot of opportunities to get around without a car. Buses at the downtown bus station are only 5-minute walk away. Grocery outlet and Fred Meyer's are close and offer easy access to groceries. I've lived in my neighborhood for 3 years now, and I want to welcome as many people into that community as possible. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, my name is Sam Grello, and I was a property manager for Apex Property Management from October 2015 to December 2016. I'm a realtor now, and I'm a renter. So while I was with Apex, we had about 1,200 units, and of those units, we had 3 tenants who had Section 8 housing. And those people we had because they had been grandfathered in from when Apex took over managing the building. So why did we not take Section 8 housing? It was extra work. And that's it. When we would renew leases, send them out to the Section 8 tenants, usually there'd be a rental increase involved, and we would have to wait extra long to hear from the government agency to see if they accepted it or not. And so that was one of the primary reasons that we didn't take Section 8 housing, and I think that's wrong. So if there's a source of income discrimination, if we banned that, I think that would take care of that problem. Thanks.
Hi. I'm a student and a renter. And I mainly wanted to come here just to try to express some of the frustration that I know a lot of the community is having actually over the scheduling of this event because of the county council meeting happening right now about the new mega jail that was passed at the county level and is going to be going to the city level, and especially to point out the connections between this issue of affordable housing and homelessness and this issue of building a new jail. So I think that it was irresponsible to schedule these two things at the same time because it diverts attention from an issue which needs pressure on it right now. We are continuously, as a community, incarcerating the homeless in our community, looking to solutions that are further incarceration rather than offering affordable housing, diversionary programs. And I think that one step towards becoming a more ethical community city council would be, first of all, turning down that sales tax. I encourage everyone who has the availability to attend this meeting after it's at the
311 Grant Street, because it is so essential towards really addressing this in a meaningful way that connects all of these issues. Homelessness is something that is largely contributing to the over-incarceration of our community, and it's a conversation that we can't have without having both sides informing one another. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nathan. I'm here in solidarity with the Bellingham Tenants Union, and I just want to kind of express my own experience and the solution that I have, which is unfortunate and might be the solution for many others, is that they're just going to have to leave Bellingham because of affordability crisis. And my own story, I've lived here since I was a kid and lived in the kind of forgotten, off the map area near the airport, and grew up there in the 90s, kind of a, it's kind of in the backwoods. There's no street lamps or sidewalks, and so I grew up over there by Alderwood Elementary School, and just knowing what it was like there and seeing what it's like today, there has been a lot of progress. They're not apartments anymore, they're called condominiums now, gentrification or whatever, but that said, it's too little too late for a lot of folks that are my age, and especially older folks, like my dad. Our house was foreclosed in 2010, and he was then forced into near homelessness. My sister and myself, he was living with us for about 2 years, right after we were out of college. So yeah, it's just, I think, an issue of people being able to really afford a fair price for the homes, battling really large companies that have control, and this city favoring property owners over individuals. And so yeah, I just really think that our emphasis needs to be on the people and rather than larger corporations. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name's Carla Lee, and I'm a real estate lender. And I've been teaching first-time homebuyer classes since the mid-'80s. And I'm here to share with you some of the experiences that I've had doing that. By no means do I call myself an expert, but with the level of history that I have, I think I have some good insights as to the mindset of the first-time homebuyer. First-time homebuyers, when they come in, they're all starry-eyed and they're all happy, and they've been saving their pennies and nickels and dimes and tax returns to be able to come in and buy. And when they sit down and they look through that whole process of what it takes to make a house payment and where that puts them in the price range, there is no way that they can buy inside the city limits of Bellingham, even if they're above 80% of the median income, oftentimes even at 100% of the median income. And the reason for that is that there isn't any affordable housing. Yes, there are condominiums, but let me tell you what happens when I take those starry-eyed people and ask them to consider apartment-style condominiums. They're crestfallen. They will go to the county, they'll go to Skagit County, but they do not want to buy apartment-style condominiums. And I know this, from the 90s, I know this from the 2000s. Every time the market gets really hot like this is what happens. So unless we can pull together, because life is just simply a matter of choices and priorities, and the choices and priorities that we make as a community will definitely define whether we have the type of community in Whatcom County and within the city of Bellingham that people have moved here and they cherish and they relish living here. So we all have to make some choices and some priorities and come together, not only as real estate agents, builders, developers, planners, zoning people, landowners, and neighborhoods. We need to be more supportive.
Good evening. My name is Jenna Moores, and I am a junior at Western and a renter from Lakeway Realty. Tonight, I hope that by sharing the experiences I have had with this company, you will be motivated to take more action regarding low-income and student renters and the monopoly that slumlord rental companies have over them. My roommates and I lived for 6 weeks with the hole in the bathroom floor of our only working bathroom. The hole was about 18 inches long and wide and had a visible line of sight to the underneath of our house. It increased the amount of mold exponentially, as well as let bugs and other vermin into our home. We called and contacted Lakeway Realty, and they blew us off every time, and we could barely get a meeting scheduled with the owner of our house. Other than this hole, there was an abundance of simple issues like our front windows needing locks since we moved in, with countless promises they would be fixed. They also had the nerve to raise the rent on this place for the upcoming rental year. The blatant disregard for basic safety in our home is why we need more action with consequences towards these monopolizing landlords. The most aggravating part of this situation is that this could have been identified if a proper inspection would have taken place. In November, Lakeway sent out a private inspector who did not take it serious at all, missed other obvious issues in our house, and passed the inspection on to the city. This is another example of how Lakeway does the bare minimum and skirts responsibility from real issues. There needs to be consequences for these actions. Somehow, this cycle needs to stop, and unfortunately, I'm not educated enough in the terminology and everything that goes on with how this works. But somehow, there needs to be an end to this cycle of low-income and student renters that are perpetuated into having to pay more money and barely live off of a simple paycheck for the upcoming school year. Also, today, we have heard nothing about how we can solve the rental issue in the city. I've heard about buying homes, but I'm 20 years old. There's no line of sight for that for me right now. I need to think about right now, and I hope that this inspires you guys today. Thank you.
My name is Dan Dunn. I'm the president of the board of Colston Community Land Trust. I also own 2 construction companies in town. My employees make between $20 and $30 an hour. They get 5 weeks paid vacation, health insurance, 3-day weekends. But even a lot of them have trouble finding or buying homes. So my work on the Community Land Trust, which you guys have supported to a great extent over many years, which I appreciate, I think is going to help those folks eventually purchase a home. Specifically, right now we're building out a project on Telegraph Road between James and Deemer, which will hopefully wind up with about 50 homes that are in the 2- and 3-bedroom range that'll cost homeowners between $175,000 and $200,000, which is a price point you can't meet anywhere else in the city. And we can't do that without your support as City Council, as well as the state support and some federal support, although we'll see how that goes. I think in response to the previous young woman's discussion about not having a conversation about rental, I agree, rental is a huge issue, but when you have somebody who can purchase a home, they are oftentimes vacating a rental, so that's room for somebody else to move in. As a business owner, I'm also a capitalist, and so I believe that the market, has a great way of solving some problems. Obviously, I'm also a socialist because I work with a land trust and believe in subsidies for a lot of these things. So it's kind of a hard mix to justify sometimes. But I think that when you can provide homes for people, those people are probably vacating a space that then a rental can move into, and hopefully that provides capacity for everybody to have a place to live. Thank you.
I spoke before the City Council last week, and you may remember that I am disabled and homeless through no fault of my own. And I do have a Section 8 voucher. I've been searching for a place to live. The majority of property management companies in Bellingham will not take Section 8 vouchers, flat out. The Royce Group has various apartment complexes across town that have affordable for a voucher, 1-bedroom apartments that may be coming available soon. And they say they take Section 8, but they require that tenants meet a $1,000 a month income threshold, which I do not. So those are not open to me. So despite having being a good tenant, always paying my rent on time, having a great rental history, and no criminal record, I don't smoke, drink, or do drugs, I cannot find a place to live. I can't find any property managers or landlords willing to work with me. There have been a few that say that they will take my Section 8 voucher. However, it's so low that they can't possibly lower their rents that much in order to take it. And I'm not alone. There's other people just like me. in the city that are facing the same dilemma and are homeless and couch surfing. Thank you.
My name is Brian Jones. My daughter and grandson moved in with us after she completed university and began work at the hospital. Unfortunately, her husband left her after serving in Iraq. My grandson has autism and requires a system at Bellingham's excellent schools. After a 6-month search for an apartment, she discovered that it was possible to get assistance from the Skagit Whatcom self-help home. And so now we spend 35 hours a week after work building a new home for her. But without that, I'm not really sure when my daughter would move out. We're grateful for this opportunity, but we wonder why Bellingham seems determined to limit its housing and land supply. Why must our workforce compete unnecessarily with our university students? If we cannot provide workforce housing, we diminish business growth and potential locations that provide our best jobs. Without available living space, and with the Hearst decision, we're going to see longer commutes, and we're going to have to, I believe, that the growth that was going to go in the county is going to have to come in the city. I have a few ideas on how to work towards a housing market. First, encourage the private market for those student housing, like on Lincoln Street. That took 700 students off the.
Sir, your time is up.
Oh, sorry.
Hello, my name is David Zhang. I've been a resident of Bellingham for 14 years. Got my undergrad and a master's degree at Western. Got a master's in environmental education, but had to get a job as a software engineer to afford to live in Bellingham. Recently became a landlord. I bought an old church on High Street, the Karate Church, and been doing my best to renovate it and get it up to fire code. And the planning department has been very helpful, but I'm surprised that there weren't that many incentives for me to do a kind of infill converting an old building into a residential unit. Mainly, like, it was unaffordable for me, for instance, to increase the size of the water main. Getting fire sprinklers for an old big building like that is unaffordable, and it took it took all my savings and like $20,000 of loans just to get the space up to code for artist studios and a community center. So I think the city could be doing better to offer incentives for people who want to do community development in town. I think, so before I became a landlord, I was living in a student co-housing for $300 a month for a room, and I think that's about the price that people can afford and be able to live comfortably in this town. So that's the price that I would like to afford to offer residential units at, but unfortunately I can't with the limitations on renovating old buildings. And I think it'd be great if I can do the same. If I really like what Greg from Opportunity Council said about doing co-housing and apartment-style co-housing downtown in some of the old, looks like unused buildings downtown. But from my experience, that would be unaffordable for almost everyone except for big development companies who and absentee landlords who are only going to drive the prices up. We need incentives for local people owning property and renting out to people in town. Thanks.
Hi, thank you first for just hosting this. I think this is a great
space and the beginning of a long process of solving this housing crisis that Whatcom County is experiencing. A little bit about me. I am a housing case manager at Opportunity Council. I work with families and individuals that are experiencing homelessness. And one thing I see a lot that a lot of people have already spoken on is income discrimination. And the stigma that comes if you are receiving a one-time payment from Opportunity Council, whether it's rent arrears or a deposit or an application fee, that stigma is truly devastating to people. And frankly, it's really hard to stay positive with our clients and to hold on to that hope when we're looking online together for housing and we see nothing that's in our budget and ads that say no housing assistance. I'm currently working with a few individuals and families that have the privilege to hold Section 8 vouchers. One specific mother with a 10-year-old child that her voucher is going to expire in about a week, and they have no housing options as of now. So, like many other people have expressed, really passing an ordinance that bans income discrimination really needs to happen, and is going to be one of the many first steps it takes to end this crisis. Thank you.
Dave Edelstein. I believe we have multiple affordable housing crises in Bellingham. The first one would be homelessness. And it's acute, and it doesn't seem like we've gotten a grip on where we're going with that. And I'll let other people speak to that. The next crisis that I'll observe affordable housing would be for rent. That is also acute. The very best thing the City Council or the City of Bellingham has done was put into place a real estate tax abatement program that allowed many hundreds of housing units to be built downtown, which are a credit to the community. The next affordable housing crisis that I'm identifying is for purchase. It's free market built housing, not government subsidized. Mr. Sepler is correct. I think Rose Lathrop also mentioned the infill toolkit. That's going to do a very good job providing housing forms for people that haven't had purchase opportunities before. If this is a community problem, let's pass or put before the voters a housing levy to help for purchase housing. But if you put it out to the voters, make it revolving so it gets paid back, I'll vote for it. Your best tool is incentives. You folks should spend your time, instead of regulating, you should spend your time using your imagination to incentivize the builders and the developers to do the public good. That's where we'll go the furthest. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I bought my first home with the help of Colshan Community Land Trust, and I was 25 years old. I didn't really think housing ownership was part of my options, but it was, and I was able to own that home for 10 years. I provided me the stability I wanted to stay in this community, and when my wife and I had a family and grew out of that home, we had enough equity to sell that home, purchase something larger, and that home is permanently affordable. So the next family that moved in there was income qualified, and that home is going to retain as an affordable housing option in our community for perpetuity. I now have the pleasure of serving on Colshan's Board of Trustees and helping guide some of the important work we continue to do. I'm also a candidate for Port Commissioner.
No campaigning is allowed.
Okay, no campaigning is allowed. But I do want to encourage the council to think about how the council can work with the port to ensure that Affordable housing is part of our conversation around economic development, and what those housing units that are going to go in to the waterfront redevelopment, how we can keep some of those in the mixed income and affordable category so that we're keeping that framework as we're building new housing as well. Thank you.
Yes, my name is John Moon, and I work for Habitat for Humanity. Excuse me. And we believe in a simple, decent, affordable place for everyone. And we know that we live in a wonderful community here in Bellingham and Whatcom County, and that there is enough windows and doors and roofing tiles to end poverty and substandard housing. The key is how we come together as a community to make that happen. And me particularly, I'm very grateful for some of the partnerships that have come together. They're wonderful resources in the community. I want to say thank you to the City of Bellingham and to the Planning Department for this project of that Telegraph Road that you heard mentioned a little earlier, because without their help, we would not be where we are with that project today. And where we are with that project is that we have a price point of $125,000, and with a Habitat mortgage, that means a mortgage payment of $345 a month. So that's incredible. Everyone, including someone that is earning minimum wage, could become a homeowner. And this is a development that is, first phase is going to be 20 plus homes, and then the second one up to 50 homes. And we wouldn't be able to do it, again, with one of our partners, with Colson Community Land Trust. And we wouldn't be able to do it without a lot of private community input. So for instance, RMC Architects and Wilson Engineering, these folks come to the table and help build the community. And this is what I'd like to encourage everyone to do, is to know the resources out there, to align with the community groups that are working on permanent affordable housing for all. Thank you.
First, I'd like to say thank you for allowing this forum. It's obviously really important, and I'm really encouraged to see so many young people here tonight. My daughter is about to turn, or she just turned 25. She's graduating from college this weekend, and I worry about her opportunity to come back to Bellingham. She's in Portland now. I'd love for her to come back home, and it worries me seeing what housing prices are doing and whether or not she'll have that ability to afford rent here, let alone ever becoming a homeowner. Colson Community Land Trust has built helped 187 families so far. These are first-time home buyers who have realized the dream of home ownership. We've been able to do that, as John mentioned, through some strong partnerships with the City of Bellingham and other partners, and that's been a key piece for us to do the work that we do. And I'd like to encourage the city to continue to look at some innovative housing types, look at minimum lot, or reducing minimum lot sizes, or doing away with them altogether as a way to foster some creative housing in our community. I sat in on an accessory dwelling unit meeting today. That was really encouraging. I think that's an innovative housing type that we can bring to our neighborhoods and increase affordable housing. I'd also like to look at rolling out the infill toolkit into single-family neighborhoods. I think that could be a useful thing to get some density. I mentioned the condo comment earlier, or question that I brought up. I'd like to see the city provide some incentives to build some homeownership downtown. I think it would help revitalize our downtown in a much-needed way and free up some other homes in our community and help bring some inventory. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andy Ingram. I've lived in Bellingham now for about 10 years. Most of that spent in Happy Valley. Currently work as a school bus driver here, and I've been a renter for basically the entirety of my adult life. When I first came to town and I went to my orientation at Western, I was surprised to be told during that orientation that most of my peers, the graduating class at that time, would be moving back in with their parents. That was a statistic they shared with us, and that was in 2008, but so it may have been related to the economy at that moment, but it also, here in Bellingham, is an issue that's pretty related to the housing struggles that we young people find here, and not just young people. I've been lucky to find work and stay, but barely. Part-time work is bus driving, and You know, the housing that I've been able to make work is considered dubious under current regulation. You know, there's 3 or more unrelated people, or it's an ADU that, you know, the landlord may or may not be around all the time. But to be clear, this has been good housing for me the entirety of the time that I've been here. It's been well kept, and we've been good neighbors, to speak to the community for a moment, stewards of the neighborhood more than anything. So when I learned last fall about the controversy around ADUs, I looked up the zoning in Bellingham and found that it was mostly single family. I think this is unjust. I think it's unaffordable, and it's the least accessible zoning unit. Many of these neighborhoods, the infill kit is not allowed, and I think it's an exclusionary zoning plan. So I want to ask the city to, well, first of all and foremost, prevent discrimination that's against people based on their income. Encourage ADUs where you can and how you can. Relax or do away with the restriction on boarding houses. Consider rezones for more inclusive zoning. And I want to ask the community to open their minds to the changes that this community is going through. Because yes, the character of the neighborhood may change, but it doesn't have to be for the worse. Thank you.
Many of you know me from doing community development work here in Bellingham since I came to Western back when Bellingham was less expensive. So I appreciate all the community learning that's happening, and that's a good role for the government to take up, community education. I appreciated seeing all the numbers, and something stuck with me that Ted said. The downside of a dynamic growing community is it becomes more expensive. It's livable and it's very appealing, but it becomes too expensive for those of us who have lived here and helped to make it livable and appealing. So now it's a strong rental market, and there's a fact sheet from the Association of Realtors. It's actually pretty stunning, the numbers in Bellingham now. So it's a strong market. Some of us own homes. I'm a homeowner. I used to be a renter. I'm a homeowner now. Some of us own homes that we lease to others, but it's usually seen as a business. So how many of us who own homes and lease to others would be willing to voluntarily reduce the rent by 10 or 20% below what the market will bear? That's just like a foreign concept. Who would do that? It's a business. People do it for their own reasons, and hopefully they make a profit, most of them. But there are some good landlords who maybe rent at a loss, but they're very few. In fact, it takes a mission-driven organization to be willing to own property and rent it at a loss, or rent it for less than what the market will bear. Who would be a developer who would try to own a building and rent it for less than what the market will bear? Well, it turns out that almost half of the population needs housing at less than what the market will bear. The market rate housing is filled, but it's filled with people who cannot afford the home they live in. So the stats will tell you that over half of all households in Whatcom County, including Bellingham, that lease a home or rent a home cannot afford the home they occupy. So we've got a huge problem. The system is broken. The infrastructure system is broken. The market has failed all of us who can't afford the market rate.
Hi, my name is Kristen Johnson, and I'm a caregiver for my brother Eric Johnson, and he has a developmental disability, and he's lucky enough to live in Mathai Place, that beautiful, cheery development that you saw on Rose's slide, and is the first new construction project of Colson Community Land Trust. But anyway, my brother is a Section 8 success story, I guess. He acquired that home through this beautiful partnership of the land trust and his housing voucher, which I believe that the Opportunity Council administers that program in Whatcom County. And I just feel, especially now, hearing these I guess we should call them what they are, horror stories about Section 8. I mean, it just hurts my heart to hear about people with developmental disabilities or anyone living in substandard housing, being unsure if their lease is going to be renewed. I mean, God forbid, have to leave. Like, I just think of my brother having to leave the city and go somewhere else. So I guess I would say that it's beyond time for income, for protection of source of income discrimination. And I also want to say that my brother used his Section 8 voucher for a mortgage subsidy. And this is a program that I think comes and goes. I'm not sure if it still exists, but I guess I just want to let people know that that was how he got it. And especially if Greg Winter is still here, I would advocate to bring back that program and allow people who have a Section 8 voucher to use it towards a mortgage, because it just creates stability that is so invaluable for anyone, but particularly a person like my brother who has a disability. It just gives our whole family peace of mind, knowing that he has a safe and stable place to live. And I would also advocate for land trusts, because without Colshan, he wouldn't have that home either. Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Noble. Pardon my reading. So I've lived in the city of Bellingham for 6 years since moving here from the Seattle area. I'm a software engineer with no background in urban planning. I'd rather be spending this evening with my kids and having dinner as a family. And I don't have solutions and few ideas, but I do have a problem. My wife and I have a dream to help create a safe place for kids who've been thrust into the foster system. Our home, which we squeaked into in 2012, doesn't have room for our family and any foster children who need special accommodations required by the state of Washington. We would love to move to a space where this is possible, but on one software engineer's fair market salary, we can't do it in Bellingham right now. Rick spoke about trying everything legally possible to alleviate the housing crisis. I wonder what might be possible if we adjust what is legal. Why is it now impossible to build that duplex that's across the street from Ted? Why are developers feeling hogtied? Pardon my ignorance, but if I put on an imaginary landlord hat regarding Section 8, why would I deal with the bureaucratic hassle if I have intense competition for my unit? I can set a high price and pick from many fully employed and financially stable tenants. With such a low supply and high demand, why take any risks with Section 8? Again, pardon any ignorance, taking off imaginary landlord hat. Bellingham City Council, thank you for setting up this town hall to hear from the community on this topic. I imagine you're distinctly aware that people who need a solution to this problem the most are not here because they're working their second or third job. People like me are likely at home with their family after a long day of work. I assume the voices you hear regularly are from people who have lots of time to invest in maintaining the status quo. People want their neighborhood to stay quaint and quiet. They'd rather my family and kids move to Ferndale, increasing sprawl and environmental impact. Do everything possible and plausible to remove obstructions to new building and any kind developers want and people demand.
Thank you, John.
Hello, my name is Zach Brown. Thank you for setting up this venue so that we can all get together and talk about some of these issues. I live here, I rent here, I have a family here. I have a short message that's primarily, please try everything you can to increase the availability of all types of housing in this city. Especially different types of units, different types of lot configurations, things that may not be currently up to code right now. Perhaps the code could be changed or zoning could be changed. I guess that's my main point. Please help to increase any housing supply if at all possible. I think that is integral to the health of the city, integral to our local environment, and most importantly to our families. I think Bellingham is an amazing city, and we can't close it to anyone who's new or has a low income, but by not encouraging additional housing, that's in effect what we're doing. So I guess please try to incentivize and encourage additional housing if at all possible. Thanks.
Thank you, council members, for putting on this event. I think this should have been done a few times while you were working on the comprehensive plan, but that's hindsight. I'm a land use consultant, and so I work in the building industry, and I got into the field back in the 70s, hired by Whatcom County to do shoreline management, and what was true then was there weren't enough regulations. Now, the regulations are too complex, too conflicting, and too subjective, and I think anybody who's tried to get a permit other than for tool shed lately would agree with that. I have copies of my statement here. I've given them to Rick Sepler to hand to the council when we're done. So I think from my experience over the last couple of years, I originally thought that wetland buffers and things like that were the big problem, but now I think it's the lack of capital facilities. And that's a word that I would wager that most of the people in the room would have a hard time explaining what that really means, because I had to really work on it to get it. And so there are different levels of capital facilities. At the top are the really big items like arterial streets, sewer trunk lines, pump stations, the fire stations, heavy duty things like that. And then at the bottom, there's a couple layers in between. The bottom are the site-specific development that a developer has to do. I mean, the on-site streets, street lights, underground utilities, and so on. So my problem right now is that it's an economic, the city seems to be saying that in order to add any urban growth areas, the private parties have to pay for all the capital facilities to make that serviceable. And I don't think that's right or fair. That burden should not be placed on private developers totally. They already have quite a burden. And we need to find a solution for that problem. Thank you.
I'm Michael Chaverio. I have lived in Bellingham for 49 years. I am privileged to own my home now in retirement because of a few factors. One is my age, the other is my skin color, the other is my gender, and the other is the fact that I had a little generational wealth to start out with some years ago when I made my first down payment. I have these privileges that a lot of young people today do not have. I believe affordable housing is a human right. As Western Professor Damani Johnson told those of us gathered at the KCLT fundraiser last week, housing as a human right has been included in UN resolutions on human rights for many years. In our country, we allow and we even encourage using residential real estate as a speculative commodity, which results in inflated rents and home prices. Bellingham can do a few things to help move our country toward realizing the reality of housing for all. One, as many people have spoken to, pass a resolution, no, that's a different one. One, pass a resolution declaring that Bellingham recognizes affordable housing as a human right. Two, work with the tenants union to support renters' rights. Three, pass an ordinance, as many people have mentioned, preventing landlords from screening out tenants due to income source. Four, work with the KCLT and other nonprofits to increase the percentage of housing stock that is owned by nonprofit land trusts. And five, go further to enact more inclusionary zoning. Find a way to do it, Mr. Sepler, as part of a plan to slow down and ultimately reverse the ghettoization of renters who are low income and people of color in our community. I grew up in the segregated Deep South, and I'm very sad to see our community now moving toward segregation of the type that was normal when I was a child.
Good evening, council members. My name is Russ Sapienza, and I have been a resident of Bellingham for going on 20 years now. I am one of those people who are severely cost burdened. I have very little monthly income, and half of it goes to rent. You multiply my situation by about 10, 20,000 people, and I seriously doubt you're going to have the kind of community that you need. Not just want, but need. What's really needed is having a community that has people from all incomes, not just a few that you find in Bellingham Alive or something like that. No offense to them, but you have to have people who've been here for a long time and are struggling. And if something ever happens, I lose everything. I wind up homeless. And this is a story that's repeated over and over and over again, and that is unacceptable. We need more housing. We need more infill. That's what's needed for now. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Eric Bostrom. When you want to change things, and you want things to be different, you got to do something different. If you keep doing the same thing, you get the same results. And I really like this idea of green, smaller, creative, change the dynamic kind of homes that people can own and people can rent at both at lower prices, hopefully. So I think we need to start looking more at less regulation, less of the whole permit thing that's just gone crazy in this town. And we need to start looking at the word incentive. And together we can make this happen. We can make affordable housing happen. And I believe the key driver is affordable home ownership of smaller type creative units. It's not going to solve it for everybody, but it's going to become a symbol that will lead to other help all over the place. And I know it can be done if there's a will to do it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Chris. I don't need to be loud. Thank you for having the town hall. I've lived in Bellingham for over 15 years, and I've been a renter all that time. I don't really see any near future where I'll be able to be a homeowner. It's not even necessarily a goal of mine, and I feel like a lot of people in my age, I'm in my mid to late 30s, and a lot of us are not planning on owning homes if we want to live in Bellingham. I'm a single father. My goal is just to have another bedroom for my son, for him to have his own bedroom, and that's with, I have like a middle-class job in Bellingham. And so I've been working with the tenants union, and in canvassing, I've come to appreciate how much I do have, and I have a good landlord, and I have a safe home that doesn't have mold, doesn't have the heating issues that so many people have, doesn't have all sorts of hidden fees and discriminatory practices. So I want to really encourage working with getting tenant rights, inspections. We need infill, more housing. Housing is a human right, and while for some it's an investment, for others it's a severe burden. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And really, thank you, everyone. I've appreciated the seriousness, the tone, the earnest, and everything you've shared with us here today. So please, a round of applause for everyone who spoke. Just to let you know that notes were being taken for this event, and we've also received questions that were posed to the council and to the city online. You can still email more questions to us at the city. Our email address is, you can, CC Mail, is the best one? Yeah, the best address to use is ccmail, ccmail@cob.org. That goes to the entire city council with one email address. We're going to be gathering the comments we've had tonight, the comments we've been given. We're going to be holding a work session at our next meeting on Monday. All the materials may not be ready on that work session on Monday. I think that'll be more kind of a debrief for the council, and we'll certainly consider holding more work sessions. And as I said, this is not the beginning, nor is this the end of the discussion on affordable housing by the city council and by the city administration. This proceeding was also videotaped. Unfortunately, it was not live broadcast, but it will be available on BTV 10 and also on demand on the City Council's YouTube station. So you can point your friends to that also to share that. Is there any further business before the Bellingham City Council? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.